Please be seated.
Yes, Mr. Karadžić.
Thank you, Excellency. Sada bih se
I'd like now to recapitulate, or rather summarize the facts and enumerate them. With respect to the first joint criminal enterprise, I'd like to draw your attention to have you focus on some facts that we shall be dealing with and easily prove during this trial. I will deal with everything I said in my opening statement, and I dealt with matters that I would easily be able to prove during the trial. The forcible removal of Bosnian Muslims and Croats was never our plan to begin with. Not ever. It was never in our minds, let alone plans, let alone putting that into practice. And I have been saying over the past 2 days what proposals the Serb made, what agreements the Serbs agreed to, which absolutely excluded any joint criminal enterprise or common criminal purpose, especially the expulsion of Muslims and Croats from Republika Srpska. We said that we always wanted to live together with the Muslims. We entreated them to remain in Yugoslavia, but that we couldn't agree to come under a Muslim fundamentalist regime in Bosnia. And there's no doubt about the fact that it was such a regime, because Mr. Izetbegović's Islamic declaration was to be at the core of their constitution. All the agreements, let me remind you, from the 5 peace plans put forward, this accused agreed to 4 of them. We reduced to the maximum our wishes and desires and goals in order to avoid war. We brought them down to the very minimum. And I want to remind you of another fact set in stone or marble, this marble fact as I refer to it, from February 1992. Now let's see what the Serb side was doing and what the Muslim side was doing. The Serb side is bona fide negotiating, and whereas it is taking countermeasures of a protective type should the negotiations fall through, should they be tricked, should we be tricked and deceived. Now, the prosecution considers that we did not have the right to be cautious when trickery was afoot, and then says, Karadžić, yes, he did negotiate, but he had a backup plan. Well, what kind of politician would I be had I not had a backup plan, had I not had a reserve plan when I knew who I was dealing with? But I didn't. This backup plan was not my priority. My priority was negotiation and agreement through negotiation. The SDA did quite the reverse. They falsely negotiated, and they left traces that they engaged in false negotiation, whereas bona fide, they were preparing for a war. So the reverse position, and it was God who saved us not to have gone under in a situation of that kind, where we were negotiating in full faith and had to deal with the situation if it took a different course. Now I'm going to put to you an example of what happened in the municipalities. In all the municipalities, agreements were underway about the transformation of those municipalities into 2 or 3 municipalities, depending on whether there was a Croat population or 2 Muslim sets of people or whatever. When the prosecution says that as soon as they took over the municipality, now who would we take the municipality from? We were in power over there. they were our municipalities. And I think in paragraph 105 it is, that I've remembered the number correctly, where the prosecution states that they dismissed people, dismissed Muslims from the police or whatever. Now, let's see what really happened. There were Serb municipalities such as Sanski Most, Ključ, Prijedor, and so on and so forth. But as for Bijeljina, it doesn't say Serb municipality. For Banja Luka, it doesn't say Serb municipality. Pale either. Why? Because there are no conditions for it to become a Muslim municipality. So where it says Serb municipality, the agreement was that it would be a Muslim municipality too. If a Serb municipality had a Serb police force, then negotiations were underway for the Muslims to go to join up with a Muslim police station. So that was the source of what it says here, that the Serbs dismissed people. Why weren't the Muslims dismissed from the Bijeljina police force, Gradiška, Banja Luka? Why were they not dismissed anywhere else where you didn't have a Serb municipality? Not only policemen, but every institution which wasn't at the level of the town, but every Muslim municipality, negotiations were underway. And if it says Serb municipality, then that means that the services were divided there into two municipalities. If it didn't say Serb municipality, let them show me where it is that we dismiss someone from, say, Banja Luka or Bijeljina, and we'll have a witness coming in, a Muslim from Bijeljina who worked in the police force for as long as he wanted to. Everybody knew he was a Muslim. Nobody killed him. Yes, Muslims and Serbs were killed in Bijeljina. But the difference between that is who held the gun. That's the exclusive difference. So you were able to see from Radje Šubić's letter to Izetbegović, where he is calling upon the fact that he should implement agreements achieved by the Serbs and Muslims in Vlasenica and Bratunac all over Bosnia, that they would have two municipalities side by side and that they would live in peace without interfering with each other. Now, this process of negotiation, which served to preserve peace and excluded any kind of population resettlement and transference, was brutally interrupted by the SDA party, using all resources, including the directive for combat readiness, straight away as of the 12th of April. And then, pursuant to instructions and orders from the SDA of the 12th of April, all the military-able population was on the move, because there was general mobilization, which meant men from 16 to 65 were called up. It was proclaimed on the 4th of April, and all the soldiers, according to their assertions and their documents, over 75% were not in uniform. They did not have a uniform. And for the entire first year of the war, there were no uniforms. And if the person was killed wearing civilian clothing, did not mean that he was a civilian. The Serbs didn't have uniforms either, but neither did the Muslims. They didn't go to the army. They sabotaged the JNA for a year prior to that, and they went to war wearing civilian clothes. And if they proved victorious somewhere, then they would celebrate, and so would their foreign allies. If they were defeated somewhere else, then they would cry out and say that it was an aggression by the aggressor. What aggressor? Whose aggression in Kotor Varoš, for instance, or Sanski Most or Ključ, inhabited by both the Serbs and Muslims, the local Serbs and the local Muslims? We will have a witness from Prijedor here to confirm, who will confirm, and he was asked in the Kovačević case by another counsel, how did you dare? He said, well, they were better organized than us. They were a better army than us. And a counsel asked him, how did you dare to lead your people against an army like that? He said, what could I do? That was the order I received from Sarajevo. So you will see several examples. One is Visegrad and Zvornik. In Visegrad, for instance, which was thrown out of my indictment, removed from my indictment, unfortunately, let me say, there was a terror exercised by the Muslims against the Serbs. There were rapes of young girls on an ethnic basis, and there were killings, and there was the destruction of the monument of Ivo Andrić, the Nobel Prize winner, a Serb Catholic. Some Western countries did not allow Serb Catholics to remain Serbs, but Andrić always remained a Serb. And in 1991, the monument to Ivo Andrić was destroyed. Then there was the Saint Day killing. Each Serb has a family Saint Day. They invited 2 Muslims to attend the luncheon, and at the end, they killed the man for celebrating a Christian Saint Day in a Muslim Bosnia. They would pull priests by their beards. They would send back people going to Herzegovina on a pilgrimage. They took over, they stopped the JNA whenever they felt like it. Then the Serbs fled from Visegrad to the surrounding parts. And then the army set up law and order again. The Serbs returned, and then the Muslims said that they were attacked for no reason at all. In Zvornik, there was they enforced fear in the population. And as for Zvornik, they said that we controlled Zvornik. Well, in Zvornik, we controlled the Serb parts of Zvornik. And when you deduct Sapna Kovačević and other Muslim concentrations, you will see that the rest was not a Muslim majority. Then the Serbs returned, and they were revived, and then they were victorious. And then that was considered to be an aggression. In Prijedor, a similar situation unfolded itself. The agreement was, well, first of all, they lost on the 12th of April. They were prevented on the 12th of April. And then the whole of the Sana, Vale Ključ, Sanski Most, Prijedor, Bosanski Novi, that whole area, as soon as the JNA left on the 20th of May, they attacked. So along the Sana River valleys, they had the Elite Patriotic League unit there. And the Sana River Valley, pursuant to orders from Sarajevo, was set aflame. Then we have Sanski Most. I'm still not ready to examine witnesses from Sanski Most, but I do know that there are different types of villages. In certain villages, nothing happened. In other villages, conflicts and clashes took part. Hrustovo and the others, and they had 900 fighters. And the Muslims write in their books, they say, while we stood guard, we didn't have any problems. When we launched an offensive, we were hit on the hands. So we knew that they stood watch, that they had shifts. We didn't mind. That was a defensive measure. If they felt unsafe, let them stand guard. But that's another matter. When they start killing people in Serb villages, then a conflict is unavoidable. So there were 2 types. There was terror with the Serbs fleeing. Then they came back to protect their homes, their thresholds. Sometimes they were victorious, in other parts not. And then there was this other way of dividing up the municipalities. Sanski Most was Serb, the rest was Muslim. Everything was agreed to. And then they attacked us. And once they lost, when they lost, we had this hullabaloo created. 12,000 Muslims during the war lived in Sanski Most under Serb control. Sanski Most is well known from World War II. There was Šušnjar, the hill on which 5,300 Serbs were killed in a single day. So nobody can expect the Serbs to lack caution and to allow themselves to be killed again that way on Šušnjar. 12,000 Muslims live and work in Sanski Most today without any problem, and several hundred are at Manjača. And the difference is only that the one fought and the others didn't. Now let's take Prijedor, Your Excellencies. The powers in Prijedor, once they had decided to attack on the 23rd of May, they shot at a car with 4 Serbs and 2 Croats. They were seriously wounded. And they explained that the 6th of them attacked them at a checkpoint. That's ludicrous. So when the Muslims started out towards Prijedor, and they did do so, they proclaimed over the radio that the civilians shouldn't leave their homes until they had settled accounts with the terrorists. But many did not listen to that caution, and we'll hear this testimony from many witnesses because they've already made public statements to that effect. Omarska and Keratem, they weren't camps. Omarska and Keratem were investigating centers of regular state organs. The prosecution has and has not disclosed to me over 3,000 documents of the investigations and inquiries undertaken and recorded by the investigating organs in Keratem and Omarska. 1,500 people were captured in the space of 2 days. The Croatian intercepts will bear that out, as will other sources. There was massive capture of fighters and civilians who had interfered. So there was this triage in the center of Omarska and Keratem, and the following results were achieved. 41% had not taken part in any combat, and they were released. And then they reached Ternopolje and were safe there, because you couldn't have enough policemen to guard every house. But when they were in Ternopolje, then 5 policemen would be enough to provide security for them. And they confirm this, and you will see that on the footage. 41% of the detainees in Keratem and Omarska were released after this selection and triage on the basis of an investigation. They were Muslims just like the others. They were all Muslims. So 59% were found to be combatants, fighters, and so they were sent to Manjata, to the military camp there, prisoner of war camp, and 41% were released. And now I'd like the prosecution to provide me with those 3,000 investigation documents, and they should see how these investigations were conducted, because they were normal institutions carried out by the regular organs, not party organs. And then we can see and establish what happened, although it would have been better for this to have been established beforehand. Then we'll see how in a short space of time, of the 1,500 that were held in detention, 41% were released.
To govori.
This speaks something which was contrary to what is claimed by the prosecution, meaning that people who were completely innocent were being arrested and detained. Concerning other relocations or deportations, we are going to prove here, on the basis of the documents provided to us by courtesy of the prosecution, that civilians from both communities asked to be allowed to leave. The Serbs had to pay exorbitant amounts of money to be let out of Sarajevo and central Bosnia. In central Bosnia, where we were helped in the process by the Croats, because all these Serbs were fleeing. And on the other hand, we also helped Croats and their civilian. In the areas of Srebrenica and Zvornik, General Morion was under the constant pressure from both the Serbian and Muslim sides. The Muslims wanted him to take civilians to Tuzla. The Serbs said, all right, we shall allow that, but give us the Serbs from Tuzla. They are suffering there and they are in danger there. There is no doubt that Morion was exposed to such pressure. He testified to that, and he enabled the Muslim civilians to leave for Tuzla. Unfortunately, the Muslims of Tuzla did not allow the Serbs to leave Tuzla. And that was the way in which the SDA compromised the SDS in the eyes of the Serbian people by saying they are incapable of taking you out of Tuzla. We have evidence that the Muslims from Trebinje, via Biljana Plavšić, exerted pressure, which enraged me. I said, if they have any problems, the police is there to protect them. They nevertheless left, and after 3 months, the SDA wanted to have Trebinje on the basis of ethnic clemency. These are primitive tricks. We know that they ordered the Trebinje Muslims to go to Montenegro. They didn't come into any harm's way. In Professor Koljević's diary, who was a witness to the events, he was a vice president of the Republic. He was a very responsible person. He was born in Banja Luka, lived in Sarajevo, says that one of the most privileged international organizations, such as UNHCR and ICRC, demanded that I let a large number of Muslims and Croats from Krajina and the surrounding of Banja Luka to be taken to third countries. That also enraged me, and I didn't allow that. After lengthy pressures, I approved 5 trucks a day to be allowed to leave instead of 80 as they requested. If somebody was so much under threat and wanted to be reunited with their families, they were allowed to go. A prosecution witness in his statement, and he is going to testify here, confirmed this in the very same words. The prosecution is going to say that it was us who cleansed these people from Bosnia and Krajina. The people from Bosanski Novi actually used UNPROFOR to take them to Croatia. This is what they demanded. Yesterday I said that many municipalities made a lot of obstacles, asking them to provide proof that they had paid taxes and things like that.
Srbi su iz muslimanskih.
The Serbs fled from the Muslim area in a disarray. The Muslims, on the other hand, left in an orderly fashion, escorted by the police. We are going to prove all this. So, the Bosnian Krajina was not cleansed. The Croatian minister, who is now in the government of Republika Srpska, recently said, I never left Republika Srpska. Those who left were angry with me for staying behind. So, his own fellow Croats who left Doboj left in order to exploit this fact, and they were angry at him for staying behind and thereby negating their claim that coexistence with Serbs was impossible. We have an interview with this minister. So we are going to refute these things, and I believe that that was untrue. We're going to prove that not a single village that surrendered their weapons or didn't have them at all in the first place had no problems. Not a single Muslim who was not engaged in fighting had any problems. Those who were imprisoned were extremists without exception. I will now like to move to the subject of Srebrenica and the elimination of Muslims from Srebrenica by organized killing of men and by deportation of women and children and genocide of the Srebrenica Muslim. Here in this title there are no men and boys mentioned, without the prosecution explaining what boy means. But this is an emotional impact, which implies that the Serbs were killing boys. When you say a boy, it could be a 16 or 17 boy who was mobilized and who was a member of a unit. Quite briefly, let me tell you this, that there was fear fighting and there was terrible terror exercised by the Muslims of the area. They shot at the army in the back, and no army in the world shall tolerate that. They killed entire villages on Christian holidays. And this accused will easily prove that he issued orders for all Catholic and Muslim holidays to exercise restraint. In both this war and the Second World War, they killed Serbs on their Christian holidays. In 1992, they slaughtered people on Christmas Day, including civilians, without any reason whatsoever. And that was actually an attack on civilians that was provoked by nothing. I'm going to request the prosecution to provide reliable information about how many Muslim women and children were killed and how many Serb women and children were killed. And we are going to demonstrate where it was that the Serbs were being killed and where the Muslims were being killed. And both these groups were mostly killed in Serbian villages. The Muslim army attacks a Serbian village, and the result is end of both Serbs and Muslims. The place of death will clearly demonstrate what was being done by everyone in this war. Before I move to Srebrenica, let me tell you something about directives. We are talking here about directives 4 and 7. These two directives, and I'm not going to go into this whether I signed any of this, but I will focus on what General Mladić said about them leaving the zone together with the population. The population made an ultimatum and wanted to be allowed to leave. In November, in Kotor there was an uprising among the Muslims, and they wanted their population to be allowed to go, and I approved of that. Mladić, not knowing about that, said no. They cannot just allow the civilians to go, and they would remain there and fight against us in our territory. 2 weeks after that, Mladić issued Directive number 4 relating to Eastern Bosnia, and he says the same thing, that they will either leave alongside with the civilians or disarm themselves and remain to live as civilians. We have a problem with the transcript, don't we?
Da, moramo da vidimo šta je. Vidite.
Directive number 4. There is a sentence in this directive which is perpetuated further on in Directive 7, and this sentence, which is ascribed to both Mladić and me, says that we had ordered for the civilians to disappear from a certain area, but that is not true. What Mladić said was that the fighters should leave together with the civilians and not the civilians with the fighters. We are going to prove that it was the civilians who asked and who were given permission to leave. Then Mladić added that you shall also go with them. Mladić didn't say the army should leave and take civilians with them, but quite the opposite. If the civilians are going to leave, then the army should join them. There's no doubt about that. 2 weeks before Directive 4 was issued, we had this case in Kotor, and now this case has become a pattern of the Serbian conduct. If the civilians want to leave, you should leave with them and not stay behind and to shoot us in the back. The essence of Directive number 8 was that the civilians should bring the army alongside with them. These requests were made in Eastern Bosnia to Morion and in Kotor to the municipal war presidency. It was an ultimatum for their civilians to be allowed to leave. There is proof that I said it's all right, allow them safe passage, but soldiers have their own logic. They would say, why would you leave and allow civilians to leave without army joining them? We cannot allow that. Based on that, some people were condemned. which is totally untrue. This sentence says that the army should join civilians, not the other way around. And it has been established that 2 weeks prior to that, the civilians were allowed to leave, and the army was ordered to leave together with them and not stay behind and fight us. As for Srebrenica, I will just briefly describe the period before 1995. In 1993, Srebrenica and Žepa were declared safe zones before I halted the advance of a Serbian army. We had been under constant attack from that area. They were not attacking only army. They would set an ambush and they would kill a bus full of civilians. That's what was impossible to tolerate any longer. The negotiations did not yield any results. They followed orders from Sarajevo to provoke the Serbian army everywhere they could. That is how fighting took place in the area around Zvornik Kamenica towards Srebrenica, which they lost. Many of them went to Srebrenica. There was enormous propaganda surrounding Cerska, the same like the one concerning Srebrenica. There was rivers of blood. The Serbs were slaughtering people. General Morion wanted to enter Cerska to see for himself, which he did, and he reported that there was no fighting whatsoever, let alone massacre. For that reason, we ordered an investigation to be carried out regarding Srebrenica, because the same propaganda that was applied to Cerska was repeated 2 years later to Srebrenica. I halted the advance of our army towards Srebrenica, and I even ordered not to investigate any war crimes, although there were lots of them, just to avoid any revenge killings. Border between the two safe zones were agreed, and the passage was left between Skelani and Milici. Throughout the whole period, as testified by the UN Secretary General, Srebrenica and Žepa were not safe haven, but they were rather military strongholds of armed troops, from which at least one Serb was killed daily by shooting from these zones. We have daily reports of the Secretary General to the Security Council about what was happening there. The prosecution, probably based on that, accepted that these were legitimate operations. But our operation was not aimed at capturing Srebrenica. In all the agreements, in all peace plans, we had accepted that Srebrenica and Žepa would be connected to Gorazde and that it would become a canton, as is the case today with Gorazde, and they would be Muslim. All of a sudden, it turns out, once all soldiers entered Srebrenica, that they had left Srebrenica. That's when I ordered them to enter the town to restore peace and order. I have a letter to that effect because General Tolmer says what actually I ordered. Once they entered Srebrenica, there were no civilians in sight, nor any members of the military. The army fled to the woods. The civilian authorities surrenders. The army didn't listen to the civilian authorities. They fled to the forests and wanted to continue fighting. And the civilian population were not taken out of their homes by the Serb army, but rather by the UN. So, starting from the villages, they had a plan for men to join the units to make a breakthrough towards Tuzla, whereas the civilians were supposed to go to Potočari and then to be taken by Amprofor to Kladan and Muslim-held territory. Our entry was a complete surprise, but also the absence of civilians in the houses was also a surprise. The prosecution still insists, nevertheless, that this was a forcible deportation, whereas we have every possible evidence that that was not the case and that was never planned. when we heard that they want to leave their homes and to be transferred to Kladanj and Tuzla under Muslim control, we hastily started looking for buses and trucks to provide for transportation because we were afraid of revenge, of acts of revenge. There had been no killing until the 14th. There was some incident on the 13th in Kravica when a Muslim detainee grabbed a rifle and started shooting. There were no incidents prior to the 14th of July. The crown witness of the prosecution against me in the Srebrenica case was late Deronić, and they laid all their hopes in him according to 92-quarter rule. He actually testified in my favor. He said that on the evening of the 13th and morning of the 14th, there was a colonel who was allegedly wanting to kill certain detainees, and that he prevented them from doing that. He told him, if you keep behaving like that, I'm going to call the president. That was on the 13th in the evening, and he eventually withdrew. We have a language problem here between the terms detainees and prisoners of war. And we speak about prisoners. This is not a detainee in our language. When you say prisoner, that implies a prisoner of war. And those who are detained are called detainees. So we are talking about POWs. And when we speak about an exchange of prisoners without saying prisoners of war, then the prosecution claims that this was an exchange of detainees. This is another linguistic problem that we are facing here. Once you say a prisoner, it is understood that this means a prisoner of war. Captured in fight. Those who were detained on a different basis and due to different reasons. Thank you for this correction in the transcript.
On the morning of the 14th, as testified to by Deronić, I don't know whether that actually happened or not with that colonel, but Deronić himself says, I met him at Yellow Bridge, and he asked that we use the brick factory. And I said, I'm going to Pala to see the president. And indeed, he did come to see me on the 14th, and then this man withdrew. And then a member of a small-town SDS president stops a member of the main staff twice by using the name of Radovan Karadžić. Had Radovan Karadžić ordered some kind of an unlawful killing, the colonel would have said, what do you want, kid? I have my instructions. Even if Mladić had said something to him, he would say, what do I care about you? I have my boss. See? So the strongest prosecution witness, according to what was said so far, absolutely does not speak in favor of the thesis that is advocated by the prosecution. Deronić also testifies to the effect that allegedly he said to me on the 14th that some officers want to kill prisoners of war, and that I said that all of these officers were crazy. The driver who brought him testifies to the following. When Deronić returned from me, when he got into the car, he said, I cannot believe that the president knows nothing about this. The OTP knows that. I don't remember about him having said that. If he made an allusion, perhaps I didn't understand it. But saying that officers were crazy, well, there was quite a bit of tension between the officers and the civilian authorities. We held a lot of things against each other. But when a psychiatrist said that somebody is crazy, then that may sound as a diagnosis, but this wasn't a diagnosis. This was just speaking figuratively. So they cannot use Deronić against me, and they don't really have anything else. Then there's the report of the Dutch government that says that Karadžić's role is unclear. In dubio pro reo. is the rule that prevails. Therefore, there is no culpability. There is no investigation. There is no investigation for Srebrenica. I cannot say anything about Srebrenica because there is no investigation. What they created there was a place of worship. It's a myth again. On the stone there it says over 8,000 Muslims, and they could not bury more than 2,500. I don't know what the exact figure is now. But please have a look at where these Muslims come from, those who are buried on this hallowed ground. See, Bratunac, Bijeljina, that is 100 kilometers away from there, Foča, Han Pjesak, Rogatica, Sarajevo, Sokolac, Srebrenica, Srebrenik, which is even further away, Ugljevik, Višegrad, Vlasenica, and Zvornik. And now what they're saying is that the Serbs killed Muslim boys and men, 8,320. Over 4 years of war. Deaths during the course of 4 years of war. Deaths in forests around Srebrenica, when attempts were made to forcefully break through Serb territory. Nevertheless, including all of that, they could not bury more than 2,000, 3,000 people. And then this investigating material. People are being tried for Srebrenica here, and this investigating material is being dealt with just like that. Let us see where the DNA is. Now I am in the stage of establishing the truth concerning Srebrenica. Let us see whether there was anything unlawful, whether there was any unlawful killing, how did it happen, and what the extent of it was, if any. However, we have the report of the Muslim municipality itself that says we have 37,000 people. We are showing 45 for the sake of humanitarian aid so that we could feed our troops too. So if we are to add up natural deaths and deaths in combat, and also all of those who managed to get out to Kladanj and Tuzla, and when we see what they identified and in which day they identified the cause of death, executions do not take place by shells. There have to be investigations for the sake of the future, not for Karadžić's sake, for the sake of the future of the peoples over there. It has to be established who got killed, how, and in which way, and where. But just to have trials off the cuff saying such and such a number of Serbs killed such and such a number of Muslims, I hope this trial chamber is not going to support that. Let it be established once and for all what happened in Srebrenica. I have to say that I cannot accuse trial chambers of not having established that, because in our system, it is the investigating judges who are in charge. However, the defense teams were not in a position to present the truth to the trial chambers involved because there was no investigation. Simply, there was no investigation. And there was no way of saying this happened or that happened because there was no proper investigation. Now, after the investigation concerning Srebrenica, and I am going to ask for each and every report that exists, I have been given the consent of the trial chamber to receive all the material involved, all the information, and then let us create a 5% sample of the DNA, and then let us see whether there are significant deviations. If that is the case, then everything has to be examined. You see, we know to this day that graves are being exhumed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, all over Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that somebody could be buried in July in Srebrenica. Well, of course, the death of a single person is significant, but then why exaggerate? I have another 15 minutes left. Is that right? I would like to say, finally, something about paragraph 11, a rather joint criminal enterprise that pertains to hostage-taking. My essential objection is that an army cannot be held hostage. Civilians are hostages, and they are not taking part in fighting in any way. These gentlemen who were held hostage, if I can put it that way, were not civilians, and they were involved in combat. Let me say straight away, it's going to be easy for me to prove that I have nothing to do with that. A prosecution witness said Karadžić found out from the media, and the entire world found out from the media, that people were panic-stricken before the unlawful airstrikes by NATO. Unlawful bombing, because this was not close air support, which would have been legitimate if a UN unit had been endangered. However, this operatively was bombing the Serb positions, and it was a strategic decision in order to weaken the position of the Serbs so that they could not defend themselves easily. The Serbs kept these foreigners close to a bridge so that that bridge would not be hit, because in a different situation, the SDA would have slaughtered them, or rather their army would have slaughtered them. The general said in his first interview, Karadžić found out from the media. He called and said that they should be released straight away. However, that could not have been helped any longer. The media had already carried these news, and everyone started taking these hostages. Why are they not hostages, though? Why are they combatants? We are going to prove here that all UN generals are asking their civilian chiefs, please do not involve us in the conflict. You're going to expose us to danger, and you are going to make us become part of one of the sides involved. All of the commanders were aware that if they bomb the Serbs with a call made to these troops, that these troops will be involved. And it's not that they were involved through the action of their commanders only. They were even involved individually. General Rose has the transcript of a broadcast as to how his soldiers were involved, because they were the marksmen of the aircraft flying above them. And then this young man says, I have chosen a target and I can hear the aircraft. I have the target. Oh my goodness, the Serbs hit my target falls, and so on and so forth. Let us leave aside what our suspicions are and what our proven suspicions are to the effect that these UN units were involved in smuggling. For a while, UNPROFOR was called the taxi of the Muslim army because they crossed our lines unannounced. They smuggled ammunition, weapons. But nobody would have taken them as hostages because of that. They were taken as hostages when the bombing started, not for the sake of close air support, but tactically, operatively, and almost strategically for other reasons. Now, all of these military observers, we have a witness who says that these people are experts, and one such individual is more valid than an entire company of mine. I am very sorry that they bombed us in the first place, but I am sorry that this was done. But this is not hostage-taking. They were involved in a war against us. They called NATO aircraft to bomb us. They helped them. They selected targets for them. They were their marksmen. Well, people like that cannot be called hostages. So you will see during the defense case how many foreign soldiers in Bosnia were killed by the Muslim side. You will see that they downed the Italian aircraft. The Serbian army couldn't have done that in any way. And then a no-fly zone was introduced after that. You will see how many times the Muslims shelled convoys that were escorted by UNPROFOR from Igman. All of this we have on the basis of the material that the OTP has and uses against me. You will see what they did to the foreigners who smuggled weapons for them, gave them vast amounts of humanitarian aid. They shelled them. They hit them with sniper fire in order to cause odium against the Serbs. Actually, it was clear and it was unequivocally established that they were the ones who were doing that. You will not find a single case, except for one, that the Serbs did that. A lieutenant colonel, when he became very nervous, he did not kill anyone, but he simply scattered the things belonging to a convoy all over the place. I apologize to Mr. Wallgren, and I dismissed this man. His nerves were shaken, and he was upset because UNPROFOR was interfering and doing all sorts of things that they were not supposed to do. But the most important thing is what the UNPROFOR commander says: do not get us involved against the war. We will become a warring party if you involve us in this. And the moment when they started bombing us outside the close air support, they did become a warring party. Now, I don't need to dwell on this any longer. Suffice it to say that soldiers who take a particular side, regardless of what their weapon is, a laser or a rifle or whatever else, they cannot be hostages. They are combatants. They are fighting against one of the sides that can at least take them prisoner. Of course, that was not a decision taken by the civilian authorities. It was not a decision taken by the military commands, but it did so happen that the people did that. And we have proof of that in OTP material. I remember that that was the case. I remember that the images were carried all over the world. And it was hard to release them silently because the bombing was going on, and the people all of a sudden realized that that would save us. Excellencies, I'm not afraid of these proceedings. It is with great enthusiasm that I am preparing for these proceedings. Regrettably, this may endanger my health because I'm working all night, because I don't have enough time. Why do I not have enough time? Because inter alia, for 3.5 or 4 months, whatever, I did not have proper assistance. My advisors could not work with me, and the OTP had indiscriminately thrown together loads of material and alleged evidence, guided by the fact that they did not have evidence. And then, like our Marxists, they thought that someday quantity would become quality, or that it's better to use a shotgun against a little bird, and then you will hit one at least. If the Security Council does not pass a resolution sanctioning the agreement with Holbrooke on my immunity, I am going to tell you what I'm thinking about. I don't know whether all of it is possible, but I'll tell you what I think. I think it would be a good thing if the trial chamber were to return the indictment to the OTP to see all the things that they presented there that can easily be swept up as false evidence. So they should either amend the indictment, narrow down the indictment, and they cannot just say that Karadžić's intentions can be heard through Tom, Dick, and Harry's words. I'm a politician. I make speeches. If I have an intention to carry out something, I have to pacify people, and it is deeds that speak, not words. If they don't want to withdraw the indictment, if they don't want to reduce the indictment, if they don't want to isolate the things that really pertain to me, then it would be a good thing for me to get time and resources because the president of the tribunal also established that I did not have sufficient resources. So let us have exemplary proceedings that will be to the credit of the trial chamber, the OTP, and the defense. And exemplary proceedings that is going to be a blueprint for international justice, that is going to rehabilitate international courts and trials of this nature. In that case, I could take it upon myself up until the end of May, or say mid-June. If the trial were to be resumed in mid-June, then by the second half of May, I could provide you with thousands of facts, my agreed facts list. These are facts that the OTP will not be able to challenge, practically not at all. For example, the Serbs took over such and such a municipality, and Serbs lived there in the first place. For example, Karadžić was under Serb control. Serbs held under their control only a small part of Karadžić, only the Serbian neighborhood there, actually. So these are facts that we could agree on. By the end of May, or say by mid-May, I could provide these agreed facts, and this would disburden these proceedings. We could agree on so many things. That would shorten the proceedings to a maximum of, say, 1 or 1.5 years, because there would be very few facts that would be challenged and that we would be dealing with here in this courtroom. Your Excellencies, I would like to end on that note, and I think that the best thing would be to observe the Holbrooke Agreement, because that actually did take place. However, somebody did not do their work. I did my share. Could the Office of the Prosecutor ask you to have the indictment withdrawn? However, if we are going to go to trial, then there are going to be reviews of other trials where innocent men were convicted. I will be able to prove that they were convicted as innocent men as I defend myself here in these proceedings. If we go to trial, then I'm going to do whatever is up to me. If we are going to have expeditious, fair proceedings that will be to the credit of the international community and international justice, I am going to give a constructive contribution, as I have been doing all along. And my constructive contribution is going to be in singling out the facts that we can all agree upon. And in this way, we can cleanse these proceedings from unnecessary material that would just exhaust us here. We have to go to the basic merits of this case. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an oral ruling of the chamber. Following the trial chamber's decision on the accused motion for the postponement of trial, issued on 26 February 2010, the accused yesterday filed an application for certification to appeal and for stay. The prosecution responded to that application yesterday, stating that it does not oppose the granting of certification to appeal the trial chamber's decision, but that it does oppose staying the proceedings until such time as the appeals chamber determines the matter. Pursuant to Rule 73B of the Tribunal's rules, a trial chamber may grant certification to appeal one of its decisions if that decision involves an issue that would significantly affect the fair and expeditious conduct of the proceedings or the outcome of the trial, and for which, in the opinion of the trial chamber, an immediate resolution by the appeals chamber may materially advance the proceedings. Having considered the submission of the parties, the chamber is satisfied that the issue of the accused's readiness to actively participate in his trial at this stage of the proceedings, which is determined in the Chamber's decision on postponement, pertains directly to the fairness of the proceedings, and that therefore the first prong of the test for certification under Rule 73B is met in the present circumstances. Since a resolution of this matter at any later stage could require, in the specific circumstances of this case, a retrial in the event that the trial chamber's decision is found to have been incorrect, the trial chamber is satisfied that the second prong of the test is also met. Given that both prongs of the test for certification are satisfied, and the chamber's view that it is in the interest of justice for the appeals chamber to rule on this issue, certification to appeal is hereby granted. The trial chamber is mindful of the fact that staying the proceedings at this stage would have an adverse effect on witnesses who have already been brought to The Hague to testify this week and next. However, should the proceedings continue tomorrow with the hearing of those witnesses' evidence, and the appeals chamber subsequently overturn the trial chamber's decision on postponement, those witnesses would have to return to The Hague for a third time and repeat their testimony, as would all the other witnesses whose evidence was heard between now and the appeals chamber's decision. Having considered the matter carefully, the trial chamber is thus convinced that it is in the interest of justice for it to stay the effect of its decision on postponement until the appeals chamber resolves the matter. The chamber regrets the inconveniences caused to those witnesses who have already traveled to The Hague or who are in transit, and trusts that the appeals chamber will resolve this matter speedily so that we can proceed to hear their evidence as soon as possible. Plainly, it is in everyone's interest that both sides use any time available before the appeal chamber's decision to continue with active trial preparation. Therefore, now that Mr. Karadžić's opening statement has concluded, these proceedings will be adjourned until further order following the appeals chamber's ruling. Hearing is now adjourned.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.